In the vast tapestry of the cosmos, where civilizations rise and fall like waves upon an endless shore, there exists a species so peculiar that other races initially dismiss them as primitive and forgettable. These beings called themselves humans, and they possessed a trait that would reshape the very foundation of galactic society. While most intelligent species evolved to forget slights, overlook minor kindnesses, and focus solely on immediate survival and advancement, humans developed something extraordinary, an almost supernatural ability to remember acts of kindness, no matter how small, and an overwhelming compulsion to repay them 1,000-fold. What started as a simple evolutionary quirk, perhaps a survival mechanism from their harsh homeworld, will become the most powerful force the galaxy had ever witnessed. For when humans remember a good deed, they don't just remember it. They nurture it, they honor it, and they transform it into something magnificent. This is the story of how humanity's greatest weakness became their most terrifying strength, and how the simple act of kindness became the foundation of an empire that would span the stars. Because when humans say, "thank you," they mean it in ways that defy comprehension. The galaxy was about to learn that there is no force more dangerous than a grateful human. Prepare to discover why the universe trembles not at humanity's wrath, but at their gratitude. The trading post of Nexus 7 buzzed with the usual chaos of interstellar commerce. Beings from across the galaxy haggled over rare minerals, exotic foods, and technological marvels in a symphony of languages that would have driven a human translator to madness. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the atmospheric preferences of dozens of species, creating a perpetual haze that smelled of ozone and alien spices. Zrak 9, a Veltar merchant whose chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the station's harsh lighting, watched the docking bay displays with growing frustration. His cargo hold was full of premium Alterian crystals, worth enough to fund a small colony, but his buyer had just canceled their contract. The message was brief and devastating. Market conditions unfavorable. Contract void under Clause 47B. The crystals would spoil within 3 standard days if not properly processed. Without a buyer, Zrak 9 faced financial ruin. His compound eyes darted across the station's trading boards, but every potential buyer was either too far away or offering prices that wouldn't even cover his shipping costs. That's when he noticed the small cluster of beings near the lower-tier docking area. Their pale skin and oddly symmetrical features marked them immediately as the species everyone had been talking about in hushed tones. Humans. These were supposedly the newcomers to galactic civilization, having achieved faster-than-light travel only a few decades ago. Most established species regarded them as in curiosity at best, a nuisance at worst. Zrak 9 had heard stories about humans from other traders. They were said to be emotional, unpredictable, and bizarrely sentimental about the strangest things. Some Veltar merchants claimed humans would pay premium prices for items they deemed meaningful, though no one could explain their criteria. Others warned that humans were dangerous in ways that defied understanding. The human group consisted of 5 individuals. Their leader, a female with dark hair pulled back in a practical manner, was studying a datapad while the others examined the station's layout. They wore simple clothes that marked them as probably independent traders, not part of any major corporate entity. Desperation overcame Zrak 9's usual caution. He approached the humans, his translator device automatically adjusting to their language patterns. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying the melodic tones typical of his species. "I am Zrak 9 of the merchant house Valkyra. I could not help but notice that you appear to be traders yourselves." The female human looked up from her data pad, and Zrak 9 was struck by the intensity of her gaze. Human eyes were unsettling in their directness, lacking the multifaceted complexity of proper compound vision. "I'm Captain Sarek Chun," she replied, her voice steady and measured. "This is my crew. We're always interested in legitimate business opportunities. I find myself in a difficult situation," Zrak 9 explained, his mandibles clicking nervously. "I have a cargo hold full of grade A Alterian crystals, but my buyer has withdrawn from our contract. These crystals must be processed within 3 days, or they will lose their potency and become worthless." Sarah's expression didn't change, but Zrak 9 noticed that the other humans had stopped what they were doing and were listening intently. This was another odd thing about humans he had heard about. They seemed to coordinate without obvious communication methods. "What's your asking price?" Sarah inquired. Zrak. 9 quoted a figure that was about 60% of the crystal's actual value. It would cover his costs and provide a small profit, but nothing like what he had hoped for. Sarah consulted her data pad, then looked back at him. "We're heading to the Kepler system. There's a processing facility there that handles altering crystals, but we're not equipped to store them properly during transport." "I have portable stasis units," Zrak, 9 said quickly. "They would preserve the crystals perfectly during transit." "The problem is payment," Sarah continued. "We don't have liquid funds for a purchase this large. We could offer transport services in exchange for a percentage of the final sale price." It wasn't an unusual arrangement in trading circles, but Zrak, 9 hesitated. Sharing profits with unknown humans seemed risky. However, his alternatives were becoming increasingly limited. "What percentage would you consider fair?" he asked. 25% of the net profit after processing and sale," Sarah replied without hesitation. "We'll handle transport, storage, and finding a buyer at Kepler Station. You keep ownership of the cargo." Zrak 9's compound eyes widened. Most transport services demanded 40 to 50% for such arrangements. "That seems quite reasonable. We believe in fair partnerships," Sarah said simply. There was something in her tone that made Zrak 9 study her more carefully. Humans were known for their unpredictable behavior, but Sarah Chun seemed refreshingly straightforward. After a moment's consideration, he extended his upper limb in the universal gesture of agreement. "I accept your terms, Captain Chun." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. The human ship, named the Meridian Dawn, was smaller than Zrak 9 had expected, but appeared to be well-maintained. The crew worked with an efficiency that impressed him, carefully loading the crystal containers in a specially configured cargo bays. What struck Zrak 9 most was their attention to detail. Instead of simply stacking the containers, they secured each one individually and monitored the stasis field's strength constantly. When one of the humans, a young male named David, noticed a slight fluctuation in one container's readings, he immediately reported it to Sarah. "Container 7 Alpha is showing a 2% variance in field stability," David announced. "Swap it out with one of the backup units," Sarah ordered without looking up from her coordination pad. "I want zero tolerance for equipment failure on this run." Zrak 9 watched this exchange with growing amazement. His own species was known for their meticulous nature, but these humans were treating his cargo with more care than some Veltar merchants showed their own goods. As they prepared for departure, Sarah approached Zrak 9 with a curious expression. "I'm curious about something. Why choose to work with humans? Most established traders seem to avoid us." Zrak 9's mandibles clicked in what passed for a laugh among his species. "Desperation makes one surprisingly open-minded, Captain Chun. But I must admit you and your crew have exceeded my expectations." "How so?" "Your care with the cargo, your fair terms, your professional approach. I have worked with many species over the years, and few show such consideration for a partner's interests." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "My grandmother used to say that how you treat someone when you don't have to tells you everything about their character. We may be new to galactic trade, but we understand that reputation is everything in this business." "A wise woman, your grandmother." She was, Sarah agreed, and something in her voice suggested deeper memories. "She taught me that kindness isn't weakness, it's strength, and that good deeds have a way of coming back to you when you least expect it." The journey to the Kepler system took 4 standard days through hyperspace. Zrak 9 had expected to spend most of the time in his assigned quarters, but the human crew seemed genuinely interested in learning about Veltar culture and trading practices. They shared meals together, and Zrak 9 found himself explaining the intricacies of crystal grading and market fluctuations to an attentive audience. What surprised him most was their questions. Instead of focusing on profit margins and competitive advantages, the humans asked about the miners who extracted the crystals, the environmental impact of the mining process, and the end-use applications of the processed materials. It was as if they viewed trade not just as a series of transactions, but as part of a larger web of interconnected relationships. During one such conversation, Sarah mentioned that her crew was relatively new to interstellar commerce. "Most of us were in the military before this," she explained. "When we mustered out, we pooled our resources to buy this ship. We're still learning the ropes of civilian trade." You seem remarkably skilled for newcomers, Zrak, 9 observed. We have good instincts for logistics, Sarah replied. And we believe in treating people fairly. In the military, your life depends on the people around you. I guess we've carried that philosophy into our business practices. When they reached Kepler Station, the human crew's professionalism continued to impress Zrak 9. They helped him negotiate with the processing facility, using their knowledge of human industrial standards to ensure the crystals would be handled properly. The facility manager, a gruff Terran named Kowalski, seemed to respect Sarah's direct approach. These crystals are top quality, Kowalski confirmed after running his tests. I can offer you 200,000 credits for the lot, processed and ready for distribution. It was a fair price, better than Zrak 9 had dared hope. After the processing fees and the crew's 25% share, he would still make a substantial profit. As they completed the transaction, Zrak 9 found himself oddly reluctant to part company with the human crew. I must thank you, Captain Shun. Your integrity and professionalism have saved my business. Sarah smiled, an expression that transformed her serious features. It was a pleasure working with you, Zrak 9. I hope our paths cross again. As do I, Zrak 9 replied, and meant it. But as he prepared to transfer to a passenger liner bound for his home system, Zrak 9 didn't realize that this simple business transaction had been noted by several observers throughout their journey. The humans' behavior, their treatment of a desperate alien trader, and their fair dealing had been observed and recorded by beings who made it their business to notice such things. In the vast network of galactic commerce, word traveled fast, and the word being passed along the shipping lanes was that there was a human crew that could be trusted, that treated their partners with respect, and that honored their agreements even when they could have taken advantage. Zrak 9 also didn't realize that Sarah Chun had made a note in her personal files about their transaction. Not a business notation, but something else entirely. Zrak 9 of Merchant House Velkara, honest trader in difficult circumstances, trusted us when others wouldn't. Remember this. It was a simple note, but it would prove to be far more significant than anyone could have imagined. Because humans, as the galaxy was about to discover, never forgot a kindness. And when they remembered completely. As the Meridian Dawn departed Kepler Station with their earnings and a new reputation, Sarah Chun stood on the bridge looking out at the stars. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. Good deeds have a way of coming back to you when you least expect it. She had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be, or how the simple act of treating an alien merchant fairly would set in motion a chain of events that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. But somewhere in the back of her mind, Sarah Chun filed away the memory of Zrak 9's gratitude, adding it to a mental collection that was far larger and more detailed than anyone realized. Because humans didn't just remember good deeds. They treasured them, cultivated them, and when the time was right, they repaid them in ways that defied all reasonable expectation. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to be on the receiving end of human gratitude, and it would never be the same. 6 months after the crystal transaction, Zrak 9 was beginning to understand that something unprecedented was happening in the galactic trading community. It started small, almost imperceptibly, with minor changes in shipping routes and cargo manifests that only someone deeply embedded in the trade networks would notice. The first sign came when Zrak 9 received an unexpected message from Captain Sarah Chun. The communication wasn't a business proposal or a request for services. Instead, it was a simple notification that the Meridian Dawn had encountered a Veltar trading vessel, the Star Whisper, that had suffered engine damage near the Proxima Junction. Thought you should know, Sarah's message read, that we came across the Star Whisper 3 days ago. Captain Velcom mentioned he knew you. His hyperdrive coupling had failed, and he was stranded with a cargo of perishable biothermals. We towed him to the nearest repair facility and helped him find emergency buyers for his cargo. No charge for the assistance. Just want to keep you informed since he's one of your people. Zrak 9 stared at the message for several minutes before its full implication sank in. The Star Whisper belonged to Vel-Ka-7, a distant cousin who specialized in exotic biological materials. The loss of a biothermal cargo would have bankrupted Velka's trading house and left his family destitute. But that wasn't what stunned Zrak 9. What caught his attention was the casual way Sarah had mentioned providing assistance, no charge. Rescue services in deep space typically cost enormous sums, especially for complex operations like hyperdrive towing. Yet the humans had performed these services for free for a being they had never met, simply because he was connected to someone who had once done business with them. Curious, Zrak 9 contacted Velka directly. His cousin's response was effusive in its gratitude. Zrak 9, my friend, you must tell me how you know these miraculous humans, Velka's message began. They saved not just my cargo, but my entire future. And when I offered payment, the female captain said something strange. She said that anyone connected to Zrak 9 of Merchant House Velkura was worthy of assistance. She said you had shown them integrity when they needed it most, and that humans never forget such things. Zrak 9's compound eyes widened as he processed this information. The humans had helped Velka not out of general altruism, but specifically because of Zrak 9's connection to their previous positive interaction. It was a concept that seemed almost primitive in its simplicity, yet profound in its implications. Over the following weeks, more reports filtered through the trading networks. An Terran cargo hauler that had been cheated by a corrupt Galactic Trade Commission official found unexpected support from a human legal advocate who appeared seemingly out of nowhere. When questioned, the advocate mentioned that an Antera merchant had once helped a human family during a medical emergency on Kepler Station. A Visian mining operation that had been struggling with equipment failures received a shipment of replacement parts at cost, delivered by a human manufacturing consortium. The consortium's representative explained that a Visian engineer had once shared technical knowledge freely with human colonists, and that such generosity deserved recognition. Each incident followed the same pattern. Humans providing assistance, resources, or services to beings who were connected, however distantly, to someone who had once helped a human. The connections were often tenuous, sometimes spanning multiple degrees of separation, but the humans seemed to track them with obsessive precision. Zrak 9 began to research this phenomenon more systematically, reaching out to contacts throughout the trade networks. What he discovered was staggering in its scope and implications. The humans, it appeared, were maintaining detailed records of every interaction, every kindness, every act of assistance they received. But more than that, they were mapping the social and commercial networks of every being they encountered. When a human received help from someone, they didn't just remember that individual. They identified their family, their business associates, their clan affiliations, their species connections, and their cultural obligations. And then, with a patience that seemed almost supernatural, they waited for opportunities to repay those debts in ways that maximized positive impact. Dr. Kethare, a noted Alterian sociologist who had been studying human behavior, published a preliminary report that sent shockwaves through academic circles. Human gratitude, she wrote, appears to operate on principles entirely foreign to established galactic cultures. Where most species view assistance as a transaction to be completed and forgotten, humans treat kindness as an investment to be nurtured and multiplied. The report detailed case studies that seemed almost too incredible to believe. A minor functionary in the Rigelian bureaucracy who had expedited a human trade permit found his daughter mysteriously accepted to a prestigious Earth university with full scholarship funding. A Centauri mechanic who had worked overtime to repair a human explorer's life support system discovered that his entire extended family had been granted priority medical treatment when a plague struck their home colony. In each case, the assistance provided by humans far exceeded the value of the original kindness they had received. But more disturbing was the precision with which humans identified the most meaningful way to express their gratitude. They didn't just repay debts, they transformed lives. The phenomenon was beginning to affect interstellar politics in ways that made established powers nervous. The Galactic Trade Commission issued a formal inquiry into human business practices, suspecting some form of commercial conspiracy. The investigation found no evidence of illegal activity, but the investigators were clearly disturbed by what they discovered. Commissioner Threx 9, a Dracorian who had overseen galactic commerce for 3 decades, published a classified report that was later leaked to the general press. Human gratitude, he wrote, represents a fundamental shift in the mechanics of interstellar relationships. They're building networks of obligation and reciprocity that transcend traditional political and commercial boundaries. The long-term implications are unclear, but potentially enormous. What the commissioner didn't know was that his own aide, a young Dracorian named Kess, 4, had once received help from a human student during a medical emergency at a galactic university. The humans had noted this connection and were already developing plans to ensure that Commissioner Threx 9's future interactions with humanity would be favorable. Meanwhile, Sarachin stood in the cargo bay of the Meridian Dawn, reviewing the latest updates to what her crew had begun calling the Memory. It wasn't a formal database in any traditional sense, but rather a living document that tracked every interaction her people had with other species. Database update complete, reported David, who had become their unofficial keeper of records. We now have detailed profiles on 1,700 individuals across 43 species, including secondary and tertiary social connections for 60% of subjects. Any priority opportunities? Sarah asked. 3, David replied, highlighting entries on his display. Zrak 9's trading house is bidding on a major Altarian crystal contract, but they're competing against the Mordex Consortium, which has been engaging in unfair pricing practices. We could provide market intelligence that would give Zrak 9's people a decisive advantage. Sarah nodded. Approved. What else? Remember that the Cien engineer who helped our colony ship with their atmospheric processors? His nephew is applying for admission to the Terran Naval Academy, but his application is stuck in bureaucratic review. Contact Admiral Morrison's office, Sarah instructed. Tell them we're personally vouching for the candidate's family connections to human interests. The third item is more complex, David continued. That Antaran trader who helped the human family at Kepler Station? His entire merchant guild is facing bankruptcy due to a trade dispute with the Veltar Commercial Authority. But Zrak 9's house has significant influence with the authority. Sarah smiled, the expression carrying a satisfaction that would have unsettled observers who didn't understand human nature. Connect Zrak 9 with the Antaran Guild representatives. Suggest that collaboration between their peoples could be mutually beneficial. Don't mention the specific connection unless necessary. Understanding human gratitude is becoming a priority for every intelligence service in the galaxy, David observed. They're trying to predict our behavior patterns. Let them try, Sarah replied. They're thinking about this wrong. They assume we're building networks for strategic advantage, that we're playing some kind of long-term political game. Aren't we? Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. David, what did you feel when you heard that the Cien engineer had helped our people? David considered the question. Grateful. Obligated. Like we owed him something significant. And when you learned that his nephew needed help. Like we had an opportunity to honor that debt in a meaningful way. Exactly, Sarah said. We're not building networks, David. We're honoring relationships. Every kindness creates a bond that demands recognition. Every good deed creates an obligation that must be fulfilled. But the scale of what we're doing is proportional to our capacity to help, Sarah finished. As humans grow stronger, as our influence expands, our ability to repay debts increases exponentially. The Cien engineer fixes our atmosphere processor, and a decade later, we can get his nephew into the Naval Academy. Zrak 9 trusts us with a crystal shipment, and years later, we can reshape trade relationships across 3-star systems. David stared at the data displays, beginning to grasp the full scope of what they were creating. We're not just remembering good deeds. We're building a civilization based on reciprocity. We're building more than that, Sarah corrected. We're building a galaxy where kindness has power, where helping others becomes the most rational choice anyone can make. Because humans never forget, and humans always repay their debts. Across the galaxy, in council chambers and corporate boardrooms, in military headquarters and academic institutions, beings were beginning to understand that humanity represented something entirely new in galactic civilization. Not just another species seeking power and resources, but a force that operated by completely different rules. The Mordex Consortium's unfair pricing practices suddenly collapsed when their suppliers began refusing contracts, guided by market intelligence that revealed the consortium's true financial vulnerabilities. The Veltar Commercial Authority, influenced by respected voices like Zrak 9, began reconsidering their trade dispute with the Antaran Guild. A young Cien named Vel 9 received unexpected acceptance to the Terran Naval Academy, along with a personal note explaining that his uncle's assistance to human colonists had not been forgotten. Each action created ripples that spread through the interconnected web of galactic society. And, at the center of it all, humans continued their simple practice of remembering every kindness and seeking opportunities to repay them 1,000-fold. The galaxy was beginning to realize that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their military might. It was their memory, their gratitude, and their unwavering commitment to honoring every good deed they had ever received. And they were just getting started. 3 years had passed since Zrak 9's first encounter with human gratitude, and the galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. What had begun as isolated incidents of human assistance had evolved into something that political scientists were calling the cascade effect, a phenomenon that was fundamentally altering the power dynamics of interstellar civilization. Ambassador Velthor of the Galactic Council stood before the assembled representatives of 47 different species, his ornate ceremonial robes unable to hide the tension in his crystalline features. The emergency session had been called to address what many counselors considered the human question, a set of diplomatic and economic challenges that seemed to grow more complex with each passing day. Esteemed colleagues, Velthor began, his voice carrying the formal harmonics required by council protocol. We gather today to address phenomena that threaten the established order of galactic governance. The species known as humans, despite representing less than 1% of the galactic population, has begun to exert influence that is disproportionate to their apparent resources. Murmurs of agreement echoed through the council chamber. The human delegation, led by Ambassador Elena Vasquez, sat quietly in their assigned section, their faces revealing nothing of their thoughts. Velthor activated a holographic display that showed trade route maps spanning the entire galaxy. Red indicators marked locations where human influence had become particularly pronounced. In the past 36 standard months, we have documented over 12,000 instances of humans providing assistance, resources, or intervention to other species. The pattern is unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Counselor Drex Prime of the Mordex Consortium rose to address the assembly. His species was known for their aggressive business practices, but recent encounters with human gratitude had left the consortium's leadership visibly shaken. The humans claim to operate by principles of reciprocity, Drex Prime said, his mechanical voice translator adding harsh undertones to his words. But their actions suggest something far more calculating. My consortium has lost 17 major contracts in the past year, not through direct competition, but through what can only be described as systematic market manipulation. How so? Veltur inquired. They never attack us directly, Drex Prime explained, his frustration evident even through the translation matrix. Instead, they assist our competitors, provide them with resources and intelligence that neutralize our advantages. When we investigated these interventions, we discovered that in every case, someone in the competing organization had once provided minor assistance to humans. Ambassador Vasquez requested permission to address the council. She was a small woman by human standards, but when she spoke, her voice carried an authority that commanded attention throughout the vast chamber. Honored counselors, she began, I believe there may be some misunderstanding about human motivations. We don't view assistance as market manipulation. We view it as honoring obligations. Obligations that conveniently align with your strategic interests, Drex Prime countered. All obligations align with our interests, Vasquez replied calmly. Because our interest is in maintaining relationships with beings who have shown kindness to our people. If that kindness was shown to competitors of the Mordex Consortium, then, yes, our support will flow to those competitors. Counselor Kesare of the Visyen Collective requested recognition. Ambassador Vasquez, your people's actions have had significant impacts on the Sien society. Our young people now compete intensely for opportunities to assist humans, believing it will lead to future benefits for their families. And has it? Vasquez asked. Kesare's mandibles clicked in what humans had learned to recognize as embarrassment. Yes, consistently and generously. But this creates social pressures that our traditional structures were not designed to handle. Dr. Shunval of the Academic Alliance rose next. I have been studying human social patterns for 2 years, she announced. What I have discovered challenges fundamental assumptions about rational behavior in civilized species. The chamber fell silent as Dr. Shunval activated her own holographic display. It showed a complex web of interconnected nodes, each representing an individual being, with lines showing relationships and interactions. This represents the social network map for a single human family unit, she explained. As you can see, humans don't just track direct interactions. They map extended relationships to a degree that borders on obsessive. But, more significantly, they weight these relationships based on the emotional impact of the original interaction. The display zoomed in on specific nodes. A Veltar merchant named Zrak 9 appears as a primary node, not because of the economic value of his transaction with humans, but because he trusted them during a period of vulnerability. That trust has been assigned enormous significance in the human psychological framework. Zrak 9, who was present as a guest observer, shifted uncomfortably as attention focused on him. Over the past 3 years, his association with humans had transformed his modest trading house into one of the most influential commercial entities in Veltar space. Dr. Shunval continued her analysis. From this single primary node, humans have identified and cultivated relationships with 47 secondary connections, Zrak 9's family, business partners, and cultural associates. These secondary relationships have generated 131 tertiary connections, creating a network that spans multiple star systems and includes individuals in government, military, and academic institutions. The implications were staggering. The humans hadn't just remembered Zrak 9's kindness. They had used it as the foundation for building influence throughout an entire civilization. But here's what makes human behavior truly unprecedented, Dr. Shunval added, her academic composure cracking slightly. They don't appear to view this as network building for strategic advantage. Psychological evaluations suggest they genuinely feel obligated to help anyone connected to someone who has helped them. It's not calculation, it's compulsion. Counselor Threx, 9 of the Dracorian Empire, requested recognition. Dr. Shunval, are you suggesting that humans cannot control their gratitude responses? I'm suggesting that human gratitude operates at a level that transcends rational decision-making, she replied. They are psychologically incapable of forgetting kindness, and they are driven to reciprocate in ways that often exceed the value of the original assistance. Ambassador Vasquez stood again. If I may, Dr. Shunval has identified something important, but I would like to clarify the human perspective. Veltur nodded permission. We don't view gratitude as a weakness or a compulsion, Vasquez explained. We view it as the foundation of civilization. Every good deed creates trust. Every act of kindness builds relationships. Every display of integrity strengthens the bonds that hold society together. She gestured to the assembled counselors. You speak of our influence as if it's something we've taken by force. But examine the specifics. Whose lives have we made worse? What harm have we caused through our actions? The chamber fell silent as the counselors considered this question. Despite all their concerns about human influence, none could point to instances where human gratitude had actually damaged innocent parties. Counselor Yex Prime of the Antaran Collective spoke for the first time during the session. The humans saved our trading guild from bankruptcy. They eliminated corruption in our supply chains. They connected us with honorable business partners and provided technical assistance that doubled our productivity. He paused, his crystalline features reflecting the chamber's lighting. I confess that I failed to see the problem with their behavior. The problem, Drex Prime interjected, is that they are reshaping galactic society according to their own values, without consultation or consent from established institutions. Whose consent do we need? Vasquez asked quietly. To honor our debts and assist our friends? It was a simple question that cut to the heart of the matter. The humans weren't conquering or coercing. They were simply remembering every kindness and repaying it with interest. But the cumulative effect was indeed reshaping galactic civilization. Velthor called for a brief recess, during which the various delegations huddled in intense discussion. When the session resumed, the atmosphere in the chamber had shifted subtly. The Council has reviewed the evidence presented today, Velthor announced. While we acknowledge the unprecedented nature of human social patterns, we find no basis for formal intervention. The humans are not violating any established treaties or regulations. But, he continued with a warning tone, however, we strongly recommend that all member species develop policies for managing human interactions. Their gratitude, while benevolent in intent, creates obligations and expectations that could prove challenging to navigate. As the session concluded, Zrak 9 found himself approached by dozens of beings seeking information about working with humans. The irony wasn't lost on him. His willingness to trust unknown aliens with a crystal shipment had made him one of the galaxy's most sought-after advisors on human relations. Later, in her private quarters, Ambassador Vasquez reviewed reports from human communities across the galaxy. The pattern was consistent everywhere. Humans helping beings who had once helped them, expanding networks of gratitude, and reciprocity that were beginning to reshape entire societies. Her communication system chimed with an incoming message from Earth. It was from the Human Integration Council, the civilian body that coordinated humanity's approach to galactic civilization. Elena, the message began, "We've been monitoring the council session. Your handling of their concerns was exemplary. But we need you to understand something important about the current situation." The message paused, and Vasquez recognized the voice of Director Chun, Sarah Chen's sister, who had followed a different path into diplomatic service. The phenomena they're observing isn't the result of any organized policy or strategic planning. It's simply what happens when you put humans in contact with other species. We can't help remembering kindness. We can't stop ourselves from wanting to repay it. And as our capabilities grow, our ability to express gratitude grows with them. The message continued. What the Council doesn't understand is that this is just the beginning. We've been in galactic civilization for less than a century. Most of our people are still on Earth or in nearby systems. But we're growing, Elena. We're spreading. And every human who encounters kindness from another species creates a debt that our entire civilization feels obligated to honor. Vasquez stared at the message display, beginning to grasp the true scope of what was happening. The galaxy thought it was dealing with an unusual diplomatic challenge. What they were actually witnessing was the emergence of a completely new type of civilization, one built on the foundation of perfect memory and infinite gratitude. Outside her window, the lights of the Galactic Council station stretched into the distance, representing thousands of species and millions of worlds. Each light represented beings who were beginning to understand that showing kindness to a human was the most profitable investment they could ever make. But they still didn't understand the most important truth. Humans didn't forget, and they never stopped growing stronger. The gratitude that was reshaping local trade routes and regional politics today would eventually have the power to reshape the entire galaxy. The cascade had only just begun. Admiral Korthak Prime stood in the command center of the hegemony's most powerful dreadnought, the Eternal Dominion, staring at tactical displays that showed something that should have been impossible. The Terran fleet, barely a century old, and consisting of ships that galactic military analysts had dismissed as primitive, had just defeated a combined task force of the galaxy's three most powerful military alliances. But the victory hadn't come through superior firepower or advanced technology. It had come through something far more disturbing. The Terrans had fought alongside allies from dozens of species, unified by bonds that transcended traditional military partnerships. "Sir," reported Commander Vex, 7, his voice tight with barely controlled fear, "the preliminary battle analysis is complete. The Terran force was outnumbered nearly 4-1, but they received support from auxiliary fleets representing 38 different species." Korthak Prime's multiple arms gestured in the complex pattern that indicated deep contemplation among his people. 38 species. How is that possible? Most of these civilizations have been neutral or even hostile to each other for centuries. The intelligence reports suggest that each species was responding to debts of gratitude. Vex, 7 explained, his tone suggesting he could barely believe the words he was speaking. The war had begun 6 months earlier when the hegemony had decided to eliminate what they saw as the growing human threat. The conflict wasn't about territory or resources, but about something far more fundamental. The humans' gratitude network had grown to the point where it was undermining the established order of galactic civilization. Traditional power structures depended on predictable patterns of alliance and enmity, on the ability to calculate costs and benefits, on the assumption that rational beings would act in their immediate self-interest. But humans had introduced a completely different dynamic, one where past kindness trumped present advantage, where helping someone decades earlier could result in their descendants providing military support in a crisis. "Explain to me again how this battle was lost," Korthak Prime demanded. Commander Vex, 7 activated a tactical hologram that reconstructed the engagement. "Our intelligence indicated that the Terran fleet consisted of 47 ships, supported by minimal auxiliary forces. We assembled a force of 180 vessels from our most reliable allies, including Mordex Consortium warships and Dracorian battlecruisers. The hologram showed the initial deployment, with hegemony forces arranged in a classic envelopment pattern designed to overwhelm the smaller human fleet. But when we arrived at the engagement zone, Vex 7 continued, we discovered that the Terrans had been joined by ships from across the galaxy. Veltar trading vessels retrofitted for combat. Visian engineering ships armed with mining lasers. And Terran science vessels equipped with experimental weapons. Even civilian transports that had been converted to electronic warfare platforms. Surely our forces still maintained numerical superiority? In terms of dedicated warships, yes. But the combined fleet fighting alongside the humans numbered over 300 vessels. More importantly, they demonstrated coordination that our analysts say should have been impossible. The hologram showed the battle's progression. Instead of the expected chaos that should have resulted from such a diverse force, the human allied fleet moved with precision that suggested decades of joint training. The Terrans somehow coordinated 38 different species, each with different communication protocols, tactical doctrines, and technological standards, Vex 7 explained. Our forces were defeated not by superior firepower, but by superior unity. Korthak Prime studied the tactical display, tried to understand how humans had achieved something that professional military alliances spent centuries attempting to perfect. What were the human casualties? Minimal, sir. The Allied ships seemed to prioritize protecting human vessels above their own survival. In several cases, non-human ships deliberately intercepted fire directed at Terran vessels. This was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the entire engagement. Beings were dying to protect humans they had never met, driven by obligations that traced back to kindnesses received years or even decades earlier. Sir, Vex 7 added quietly, there's something else. We've received reports that similar multi-species fleets are assembling in 7 other star systems. The humans appear to be calling in all their debts. Across the galaxy, the phenomenon that had begun with a simple crystal trading arrangement was reaching its logical conclusion. Humans had spent a century building relationships, helping beings in need, and meticulously tracking every act of kindness they received. Now, faced with an existential threat, they were activating a network of gratitude that spanned every inhabited system. On Earth, President Sarah Chun, the former trader who had started it all with a fair deal to a desperate Veltar merchant, stood in the Global Defense Command Center, coordinating humanity's response to the hegemony's aggression. The walls displayed real-time information from across the galaxy, showing the locations and status of every human settlement, every allied force, every being who had ever received assistance from humanity. Status report, she requested from General Martinez, the military coordinator. Madam President, we have confirmed support from 112 species across 47 star systems. Our calls for assistance have been answered beyond our most optimistic projections. Sarah studied the strategic displays, but her attention was drawn to a secondary screen that showed something more personal. Individual profiles of beings who were risking their lives to help humanity. Each entry told a story of kindness remembered and reciprocated. Zrak 9, now an elderly Veltar whose trading house had become one of the galaxy's most powerful commercial entities, had converted his entire merchant fleet to support roles and was personally leading supply convoys to human worlds under threat. Velka 7, the cousin who had been rescued by humans years earlier, had rallied the Veltar Commercial Authority to provide logistical support that was keeping human colonies supplied despite hegemony blockades. The Visian engineer whose nephew had been admitted to the Terran Naval Academy had organized volunteer technical battalions that were maintaining human ships and installations across 3-star systems. Hundreds of similar stories filled the database. Each one represented not just military support, but the activation of personal bonds forged through decades of human gratitude and reciprocity. Madam President, General Martinez continued, we're also receiving reports that some species are supporting us even though they have no direct obligation to do so. They've observed how we honor our relationships, and they want to be part of that network. This was the aspect of the war that was most confounding to traditional military analysts. The conflict was creating its own momentum, drawing in beings who saw an opportunity to join a civilization that valued gratitude over calculation, relationships over transactions. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had transitioned from diplomatic service to strategic analysis, approached with a classified intelligence report. Sarah, we've intercepted hegemony communications. They're beginning to understand what they're really fighting. Explain. Admiral Korthak Prime sent a message to the Hegemony Council describing human gratitude networks as a form of psychological warfare. He claims that we've weaponized friendship and turned kindness into a strategic asset. Sarah considered this assessment. Is he wrong? That's the thing, Elena replied. We never intended any of this as warfare. We just remembered. We kept track of people who helped us, and we tried to help them back when we could. But the cumulative effect. She gestured at the displays, showing allied fleets converging from across the galaxy. The cumulative effect is that we've accidentally built the most powerful military alliance in galactic history, based entirely on beings wanting to repay us for past kindnesses. And now the hegemony is discovering what happens when you attack a species that has friends everywhere. Meanwhile, on the hegemony capital world of Vorthak, the ruling council was engaged in desperate deliberations. What had begun as a preemptive strike against a rising threat had evolved into a conflict that was threatening the very existence of their civilization. Counselor Dren Major activated a holographic map showing hegemony territory. Red indicators marked systems that had declared neutrality or actively supported the human cause. We are hemorrhaging support faster than our military analysts believed possible, he announced to the assembled leadership. How many defections? Asked Supreme Leader Kralamega. 17 member species have withdrawn from the hegemony entirely. 34 others have declared neutrality. We've lost access to 60% of our resource production and 40% of our military industrial capacity. The reason for these defections was becoming increasingly clear. The hegemony's member species had joined originally for protection and economic advantage. But many of them had also interacted with humans over the past century, receiving assistance, fair treatment, or simple kindness that had left lasting impressions. When forced to choose between loyalty to a political alliance and honoring debts to beings who had shown them genuine care, the choice proved remarkably easy. What are our military options? Kralamega demanded. Limited, admitted General Tex 9. The human alliance now controls or influences nearly 40% of galactic space. Our remaining forces are sufficient to defend core territories, but any offensive operations would leave us vulnerable to counterattack. Then, we propose a ceasefire. The suggestion came from Intelligence Director Quinn 3, whose analysis division had been studying human behavior patterns since the war began. A ceasefire? Kralomega's voice carried incredulous harmonics. We initiated this conflict to eliminate a threat to galactic order. How does surrendering accomplish that objective? Because, Supreme Leader, we were wrong about the nature of the threat, Quint 3 explained. We believe humans were building a traditional empire, using gratitude as a cover for expansion and conquest. But our psychological profiles indicate something different. He activated a display showing human settlement patterns and alliance structures. Humans aren't seeking to rule the galaxy. They're seeking to transform it. They want to create a civilization where kindness is rewarded, where helping others becomes the most rational choice anyone can make. And that threatens us how? Because in such a civilization, the hegemony's methods, coercion, intimidation, exploitation, become not just morally wrong, but strategically stupid. Who would choose to serve a government that rules through fear when they could align with beings who rule through gratitude? The implications were staggering. The humans weren't just threatening the hegemony's military dominance. They were threatening the entire philosophical foundation upon which the hegemony was built. Kralamega stared at the strategic displays for several long moments before reaching a conclusion that would have been unthinkable when the war began. Prepare a communication to the human leadership, he commanded. Inform them that the hegemony seeks to discuss terms for ending hostilities. But as he gave the order, Kralamega understood that this wasn't really a surrender. It was recognition that the galaxy had fundamentally changed, and that beings who built their power on fear and domination were no longer viable in a universe where humans remembered every kindness and repaid it 1,000-fold. The war was ending, but the transformation was just beginning. Across the galaxy, billions of beings were learning that showing kindness to humans was the most powerful investment they could make, because humans never forgot, and they always found ways to express their gratitude. The age of empires built on force was ending. The age of civilization built on gratitude had begun. 50 years had passed since the end of the Gratitude War, as historians had come to call the brief, but transformative conflict that had reshaped galactic civilization. The universe that emerged from that crucible bore little resemblance to the one that had existed before humans began their simple practice of remembering every kindness. Drak, 9, now ancient even by Veltar standards, stood in the observation deck of the memorial station that had been constructed at the coordinates where he had first met Captain Sarachun over half a century earlier. His compound eyes, dimmed by age but still sharp with intelligence, surveyed a vista that would have been impossible to imagine in his youth. The space around Nexus 7 had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. A permanent gathering point for representatives of over 300 species, united not by conquest or treaty, but by bonds of mutual gratitude and reciprocity. Ships from across the galaxy docked here, not for trade or diplomacy in the traditional sense, but to participate in what had become known as the Great Acknowledgement, a continuous celebration of the interconnected web of kindness that now formed the foundation of interstellar civilization. "Remarkable, isn't it?" said a familiar voice behind him. Drak, 9 turned to CDR. Elena Vasquez, now serving as the Director of Interspecies Relations for the Human Commonwealth. Though she bore the marks of age, her eyes still held the same intensity that had characterized human behavior since their first emergence onto the galactic stage. Director Vasquez, Drak, 9 said, his translator rendering the formal tones of respect that his culture demanded when addressing beings of significant accomplishment. "I was just contemplating how different everything has become." "Different, yes, but not unrecognizable," Elena replied, moving to stand beside him at the observation port. "The fundamental nature of beings hasn't changed. What's changed is the incentive structure. Kindness has become the most profitable behavior in the galaxy." It was an accurate assessment. The economic and social transformations that had followed the war were so comprehensive that anthropologists were still attempting to catalog all the changes. The old systems of exploitation and competition hadn't been abolished through force or legislation. They had simply become obsolete. When showing kindness to humans could result in technological assistance that advanced a civilization by decades, when fair dealing with human traders could open access to resources and markets across hundreds of star systems, when helping a single human in distress could lead to diplomatic and military support that guaranteed a species' security for generations, the rational choice had become obvious. "Tell me," Drak, 9 asked, "do humans ever regret what they've done? The responsibility must be overwhelming." Elena considered the question carefully. "Regret? No. Concern? Absolutely. We never intended to reshape galactic civilization. We just wanted to honor our debts and help our friends. But the scale of what's resulted." She gestured toward the bustling activity visible through the observation port. Ships were arriving and departing constantly, carrying not just goods and passengers, but stories. Stories of assistance provided, kindnesses remembered, debts repaid in ways that created new bonds and new obligations. "We've created something that's bigger than we are," Elena continued. "A system that operates by its own momentum. Beings help humans because they know humans will remember and reciprocate. But increasingly, they're also helping each other because they've seen how powerful gratitude can be when it's properly honored." This was perhaps the most significant development of the past half-century. The human practice of perfect memory and infinite gratitude had inspired other species to adopt similar approaches. The galaxy was becoming a place where kindness wasn't just remembered, it was studied, optimized, and systematically expanded. The Visian Collective had established the Institute for Applied Benevolence, which researched methods for maximizing the positive impact of charitable actions. The Veltar Commercial Authority had restructured their entire economic system around what they called appreciation economics, where the value of goods and services was enhanced by the gratitude they generated. Even former enemies had been transformed. The hegemony, after decades of restructuring, had become the Cooperative Alliance, dedicated to providing assistance and support to developing civilizations. Their former supreme leader, Omega, now served as Director of Rehabilitation Services, helping beings overcome the psychological damage caused by oppressive systems. Director Zrak 9 said, I have a confession to make. Oh, when I first met Captain Shin all those years ago, I chose to work with humans because I was desperate. I had no other options. If another trader had offered me the same terms, I would have taken their deal instead. Elena smeeded. Zrak 9, do you think that matters? Do you think the kindness you've shown and received over the years is somehow diminished because your original motivation was practical rather than altruistic? I hadn't considered it that way. One of the things we've learned is that motivation is far less important than action. You trusted us when you had no reason to do so. You treated us fairly when you could have tried to cheat newcomers to the trade networks. You gave us an opportunity to demonstrate our gratitude, which created opportunities for you to experience the benefits of working with grateful beings. She paused, watching a massive Antaran transport dock with gentle precision despite its enormous size. The cycle of kindness doesn't require pure motives, Zrak 9. It only requires genuine actions. Across the galaxy, this principle was being demonstrated on a scale that dwarfed individual transactions. Entire civilizations were discovering that aligning with human interests was the most effective way to advance their own development, not through conquest or exploitation, but through the systematic application of mutual benefit. The Altarian Republic had become humanity's closest ally after a human scientific expedition shared fusion technology that solved their energy crisis. The gratitude generated by that gift had inspired the Altarians to provide humans with their advanced material science, which enabled the construction of ships and habitats that approached the theoretical limits of engineering efficiency. The Mordex Consortium, former practitioners of aggressive capitalism, had transformed themselves into a cooperative enterprise focused on developing sustainable resource extraction techniques. Their conversion hadn't come through force or persuasion, but through the simple realization that helping humans develop new colonies was more profitable than trying to exploit those colonies. The memorial service is beginning, Elena noted, indicating the gathering crowd in the station's central chamber. Zrak 9 and Elena made their way to the ceremony space, where representatives from hundreds of species were assembling to honor the memory of Captain Sarah Chun, who had passed away peacefully the previous year at the age of 143. The service wasn't conducted according to any traditional format, because no traditional format existed for honoring someone whose influence had transcended anything in galactic history. Instead, beings simply shared stories of how their lives had been touched by human gratitude, either directly or through the cascading effects that had reshaped their civilizations. A young Messian engineer described how her great-grandfather's assistance to human colonists had resulted in her species gaining access to terraforming technology that had enabled them to expand beyond their homeworld for the first time in their history. An elderly Dracorian diplomat explained how a human mediator's fair treatment during a trade dispute had prevented a war between his people and the Centauri Alliance, leading to a partnership that had brought unprecedented prosperity to both civilizations. A Veltar philosopher spoke about how human concepts of gratitude and reciprocity had inspired new approaches to social organization that had eliminated poverty and conflict throughout Veltar space. Each story followed the same pattern. A small kindness, remembered and repaid, creating ripples that had grown into transformative changes affecting billions of lives. But the most moving testimony came from an unexpected source. Former Supreme Leader Omega, now a frail being whose once imposing presence had been softened by decades of service to others, addressed the assembly with words that would be remembered for generations. I spent most of my life believing that power came from the ability to make others fear you, he said, his voice carrying through the chamber's translation systems with surprising clarity. I built an empire based on domination and exploitation, convinced that gratitude was weakness and kindness was stupidity. He paused, looking around the vast space filled with beings whose ancestors would have trembled at his approach. The humans taught me that I was wrong, not through conquest or punishment, but through demonstration. They showed me a universe where power comes from the ability to make others grateful to you, where strength is measured by the kindness you inspire rather than the fear you generate. His crystalline features shifted in patterns that conveyed deep emotion. Captain Sarah Chun never threatened me. She never demanded my submission or sought to punish my aggression. Instead, she offered me something I had never experienced, the opportunity to become worthy of gratitude rather than deserving of hatred. The chamber fell silent as Kral Omega continued. Today we honor her memory, but more than that, we commit ourselves to continuing the transformation she began. We pledge to remember every kindness, to repay every good deed, and to build a galaxy where helping others is the most rational choice any being can make. As the ceremony concluded, Zrak, 9, found himself reflecting on the incredible journey that had begun with a simple business transaction. The galaxy of his youth, dominated by competition and exploitation, had given way to something unprecedented, a civilization built on the foundation of perfect memory and infinite gratitude. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this transformation was that it wasn't finished. Each day brought new opportunities for kindness, new debts to be remembered and repaid, new connections to be forged across the vast web of galactic society. Young humans were still being taught the fundamental lesson that had started it all. Remember every kindness, honor every debt, and always repay good deeds with something even better. Other species were adopting similar practices, creating a reinforcing cycle where gratitude bred gratitude, where kindness multiplied itself across generations. Outside the memorial station, the stars shone with the same ancient light they had always cast across the cosmos. But now they illuminated a universe where billions of beings had learned the most important truth in existence, that kindness, once given and properly remembered, becomes the most powerful force in the galaxy. The age of empires had ended. The age of gratitude had begun, and at its heart lay a simple principle that would guide civilization for millennia to come. Humans never forget a good deed, and they always find a way to repay it beyond imagination. As the memorial attendees departed to return to their homes across the galaxy, each carried with them the renewed commitment to honor the legacy of Sarachun and the countless humans who had demonstrated that gratitude, properly applied, could transform the universe itself. The great acknowledgement would continue, day after day, year after year, creating new bonds and strengthening old ones, ensuring that the galaxy would never again be dominated by fear and exploitation. Because humans remember, humans are grateful, and humans always repay their debts. The stars themselves bore witness to this truth, shining down on a universe where kindness had become the most powerful force in existence, and where every good deed echoed through eternity, growing stronger with each act of remembrance and reciprocity. This was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, not their technology or their military might, but their perfect memory and their infinite capacity for gratitude. And as long as humans existed, that gift would continue to transform every life it touched, creating ripples of kindness that would spread throughout the cosmos, forever and always.